here. It really is. It's a great place. You are great friends. I've been doing this for a number of years. You still trust me. I don't know why. But thank you. Let's begin. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Time is limited. Let's get into it. Let's start. Let's go. So you can see the title, tepid, terrific, whatever, right? There's some uncertainty, obviously, out there as to what's going to take place over the next while. But I want to stress two separate things. And you have to sort of split your brain in half. And half of your brain has to say, things are great now. They're wonderful. We've rarely had a better economy than we had in Q2. Q3 is going to be great. Q4 looks fine. So in the near immediate future, things are really, really good. Enjoy it and don't worry. What we have to concern ourselves with much more so is what happens come the end of 2019. So 18 months from now, 15 months from now, 20 months from now. Because over the next year and a half, things will slow. There are a whole bunch of reasons: fiscal, monetary, trade, tariffs, global growth, and so on and so forth, which we'll get into. But keep this in mind. Don't confuse the problems of tomorrow with the joy of today. It's like when you take uppers, they're really nice. Don't worry about the down problem. Enjoy the up. That's where we are now. Don't confuse the two, okay? You take the uppers for a reason. So enjoy it. So let's look and see why things are so good right now. Okay, so GDP is composed of four terms. C, household consumption, which is excellent right now. Jobs or growth is really very good. Wage growth is tepid. We'll talk a bit about that, but it's okay. Corporate spending on plant and equipment's pretty good, not great, but it looks to be starting to improve a little more, and it's already decent, so that's good. G is government spending. It's up because of the tax cuts that we had last December and fiscal increases we had in February, spending increases that were deficit financed, so G is strong. The last term is exports, and they were fabulous in Q2 because all the manufacturers and farmers were afraid of tariffs coming, so they exported the hell out of their stuff. So soybean sales went bonkers, literally, and it altered GDP numbers just on soybeans. So they're very good numbers. So we have all four parts of GDP going. Exports, the last term is a little weird. It comes up and down just for random stuff. But focus on the first three terms. C, household consumption. I, corporate investment. And G, government spending. Those three are moving up together. It's only the third time in 50 years this has happened. It happened in the late 80s under Reagan, mid to late 80s under the defense buildup under Reagan, tax cuts. And it happened late in LBJ. It happened under his presidency as well in the 60s with Vietnam and so on. This is an unusual thing. So keep this in mind. This is unusually strong growth. Let's get into some details. Household wealth is doing fine. House prices are up, as you know. Commodity prices are doing okay generally. Real estate's doing well. Commercial, industrial, whatever, it's all doing fine. And as a result, we're borrowing more money. And that's good, right? It's important. Look at this graph, though. The way we're borrowing and what we're borrowing for is vastly different than it was. The bottom color here is mortgage debt. That was the peak back in 07 or 08 or whatever it was, and that's still the peak today. We're still lower today than we were back then. House prices are higher, there's been inflation, all that stuff, and yet we're borrowing less money. But all-time borrowing is at an all-time high. Not a lot higher than it was, but higher. What's the difference? The biggest difference by far is student loans. See, there's nothing there at all. Grow. This is metastasizing. This is like mushrooms after a rainstorm. I mean, this is crazy, right? It's huge. It's delaying millennials. It takes them longer to get going. It takes them longer to get married. It takes them longer to have kids. It takes them longer to buy a house. It takes them longer to save up to buy a tattoo, for God's sake. I mean, this is taking time here. But they're getting there. The older millennials, the ones who are 33, 34, 35, they're starting to buy houses in real numbers. Their incomes are going up. They're just going to be a little delayed, right? The other thing that I want you to think back about is mortgage debt. And look how slowly it's growing now. The slope, how steep the line is. Isn't all that steep? Look at this. This was like AC/DC. This reminds you of the highway to hell. mean, that was it. Mortgage debt skyrocketing. That's a mortgage problem in the making. This is very different. The housing market has problems, but it's not a problem of credit availability. That's for sure, right? Consumer confidence is spectacular. Data came out this morning, it's not here, that showed another survey. There are 3. They all show households really happy. Why are they happy? They're happy because unemployment is 3.9% on its way to 3.5 before the year's out, or 3.6 or 3.7. We're going to have an all-time 50-year low in unemployment by the end of this year. We're running out of workers. We'll talk about that more. But everybody can get a job. What's your name? Dennis. Even a jerk like Dennis can get a job. It's unbelievable. With even a good company, no less. It's really remarkable. So households are happy. This is small business. Small business is as happy as they've ever been in the history of this data series. 45-year series. You see Trump winning the election, it's the vertical rise there. And I figured after that, it's going to go back down. Nothing goes up and stays forever. Things revert, blah, 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 whatever, right? No, it hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, it's even gone up. Right? It's higher now than it was right after the election. So small business is happy. Households are happy. Oh, big business is happy. Their taxes were cut. They're repatriating lots of money. They're buying back shares. There's tons of merger and acquisition activity. This is a terrific time. Small business, big business, households. We're borrowing money for stuff. We're buying. What are we buying? How do we spend our money? It's important. Are we buying oatmeal and underwear? Or are we doing cool, fun things? Let's have a look. Oh, we're going to Vegas. What says you're happy than going to Vegas? And the only reason it's down the last little bit was because of the shooting that took place that killed 60 people and injured 500. People held back, reservations went down. But hotel occupancy rates are at an all-time high. What else is going on? We're buying cars aplenty. They're not going up anymore, but they're constant level at about 17 million units a year. This is a very good number. It's not a record number. It's the 4th or 5th best year in history of car sales, which is excellent. And don't forget, cars are more expensive now, $37,000. No one drives a 4-door sedan. Only a third of car sales are 4 doors now. We all want what? SUVs, crossovers, cool things. My daughter told me this. She said, Papa, our 4-door sedan, it's embarrassing. It's like, oh, wow. Who needs this from your children? It was inappropriate. But I digress. You don't have to buy a car. You can always get a repair. You can fix your car, get a used alternator, get some tires or whatever it is, right? No, we're buying cars. We're going to Vegas. We're buying friggin' RVs. That's the stupidest thing in the world. You stay dirty. You're confined in a tight area. Who needs it? And you can't even drive your RV to work, right? So you have to get a car too. But this says people are happy, they're confident in their job, they're confident in their spouse's job, they're confident in their income, they're confident in their wealth, and we can afford to blow it on some frivolous purchases. Oh, how about home repair? Home repair is doing great. The line on top tells you the percentage increase in home sales, home renovation, so it's 7%. And the bottom tells you dollars, $350 billion in home repair. This is terrific. The stock's getting older, and people why are people fixing their houses up? They're fixing them up because rates are low, right? Because your appreciation in your house is high. You're stupid. No point talking to you. And third, maybe the biggest problem, there's nothing to friggin' buy. So people say, well, I can't get the house I want. I'll turn the house I have into something passable, right? That's like, what's that terrible song? If you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. So here we're turning the house we don't really want into something better, right? It's kind of sad, but it's true. But this is good for the economy. The problem is it brings housing supply down, because once you fix your house, you're not likely to put it on the market, right? You've plunked $100,000 into it. I'm not going to go sell it now. But home improvements are doing well. Oh, we're buying racehorses. Yeah, of course. How about that? Let's get a $500,000 racehorse for kicks and giggles. Sure. So we're buying things we don't need by any stretch of the imagination. So if you put this together, the first term in GDP sees going up by almost 3% a year. This is solid. It's because, again, unemployment is low, job growth is good, wage growth is okay, and so on and so forth. How about the next term, I? What's going on in I? I begins with oil. You gotta think about oil. The US is now, literally as of last month or 2 months ago, the world's biggest oil producer. More than Russia, more than Saudi Arabia. Because of fracking largely. This is important. So now when oil prices go up, it hurts the US economy because we as consumers have less money because we're paying more for gas. But the oil patch, here rigs, vertical, horizontal rigs, are doing better because they make more money when prices are higher. They drill more. So the negative consequence of higher prices is much lower than it was before. And we spend less of our percentage of GDP on gasoline than we have in the past too. So this insulates our economy a bit from higher oil prices. So even though prices now are getting up there a little bit, it hasn't seemed to matter too much for these reasons. If it gets much higher, it'll begin to be a bit of an issue, but we're not there yet. And we probably won't get there either, is my bet. Corporate profits are spectacular, in part because of recent tax cuts, but a large part, 40% of the increase in year-over-year corporate profits is simply because they're doing better, earning more, selling stuff more, supply chain management, and so on and so forth. So things are good. They really are, and they're tightening up too. They're tightening up. You know, the power of you figure out what it is you do best, you push hard, and you do it best, right? Corporate profits are good. Look at these manufacturers. They must be on drugs all the time. They are so happy, it's almost irresponsible. I'm kidding. Look how happy they are. This is very high level of happiness, 60, and it's been going on now for almost 2 years. They've never been this happy for this long since here, but they weren't so happy here. They were happier a little, but not for so long. This is the best manufacturers have been in 20 years. They're 12% of GDP. But look at the service side, the blue line. They're also incredibly happy. Look at this, it's been trending up the last 3.5 years or so. Wow, manufacturers are happy, service providers are happy. That's you know, real estate services, financial services. Everybody's happy. The economy fundamentally is good. So look at this number. This is spending in equipment, not plant. The second term in GDP. You can see now, it's now higher. It's not adjusted for inflation, but it's higher now or as high as it was then. We're spending a lot. And now that workers are getting harder to find, firms have a stronger and stronger incentive than ever to look to do this, right? They're going to invest in plant because they can't find workers. Worker wages are going up, so we'll invest in plant. Oh, taxes are more favorable for investing in plant because depreciation schedules are more favorable. Great, we'll invest in plant. So everything suggests this will continue to rise. So this is very good news. The next term we're going to look at is G, government spending. And this is where it begins to get dicey. Watch closely here, because this is where I begin to get nervous. The first thing I'm going to point out about being nervous. 2 things occurred last year. One occurred in December when there were the tax cuts, right? That shows up as blue. The other thing that happened was in February, the Democrats and Republicans got together and passed some spending increases of $400 billion over 2 years. They come up in red. If you add up the stimulus from the tax cut and the stimulus from the spending increases, you get red and blue together. And right now we're about here. We're at the peak of the fiscal stimulus that's coming from all this spending that's coming from DC. That's the third term, G in GDP going up. It's these 2 things that drive the boat. But they're going to end. The spending increases are for 2 years. So in 2 years, they end. End of 19, they're over. And the tax cuts, while they remain for a foreseeable future, some parts ending in 22, some in 25, the problem is your taxes aren't being continually cut. So think of yourself as a kid. You have an allowance, it's $1 a week. And then you get an allowance doubling to $2 a week. So from here to here. For 1 whole year, the difference is $1. So year over year, you have more and you spend more. But after a year is up, then the comparison's to the same. The taxes aren't being cut anymore. You had $1, then 2, and after another year it's 2. 2 compared to 2 a year earlier is no change. So the tax stimulus goes away as well, largely. There's some in plant and equipment that will be there, but by and large it's gone. So if you look at this graph, come 2020, notice it's mildly contractionary. So the stimulus that we're enjoying that's really powerful now actually becomes marginally contractionary. Something to think about. And the other concern that I have in the long run, not in the next 6 months, but the next 2-3 years, is the size of our budget deficits. If you look back at the end of the 1999 cycle, long business cycle, that was the end. We had surpluses. This was the end of the cycle just before the housing bust, right, and the credit crunch. We almost ran surpluses. End of cycle, end of cycle. Now we're nearing the end of the cycle, and we have incredibly large budget deficits. It's weird. It's not really good policy. We're benefiting right now from this large government spending, but it's helping to push the budget deficit a little worse. So when the recession comes, who knows when, by the way, it'll be harder to get out because we're going to have less fiscal maneuvering room to cut taxes, increase spending, and the things that Congress does. So keep this in mind in your head, right? Let's talk about tariffs for just a minute because everyone seems to care about them. This is the example here of the tariffs on, I think, aluminum and steel. And who wins when you impose tariffs on aluminum and steel? If you said aluminum and steel workers, you're a friggin' genius. Yeah, and everybody else is a loser. Every single else person. When you impose tariffs, you hurt the country you impose them on, and you hurt yourself too. And China reciprocates and does the same thing. It lowers global growth. These are the two biggest economies in the world. If they do this massive trade war, they bring each other's growth down. Their imports from other countries, unrelated, Taiwan exports chips or something, right? This can hurt. So let's see how big the costs are. Right now, the tariffs don't matter. Tariff impact on our economy is very slight, less than 1/10%. I don't care about it. It doesn't matter. But if it gets as bad as it possibly could, and we start tariffing all the Chinese goods and European automobiles and so on and so forth, whoa, this really gives me the shivers. This is a situation where where we're about to be, where we're going to impose more tariffs, $200 billion of more tariffs. And you can see the economic impact in green's about 1/4 point of GDP. This is no longer a trivial matter. And if it becomes a full-blown trade war, the consequences get much bigger. They begin to impact global growth. So let's hope this tariff thing goes away. The thing that troubles me in the short run is there's no upside gain here. If we do nothing, we're where we are. If we do something, we're worse off. So this trade war in the short run is the biggest fear I have. I think there's about 1/3 of a chance of it metastasizing and becoming a big trade war, but nonetheless, I'm concerned. Last but not least, this is GDP growth. And you can see that despite the fact that we had a great quarter, Q2 was over 4%, the best quarter we've had since 2014, right? GDP doesn't grow that much. It can't. GDP can't grow fast. That's why come 2020, we'll discuss more impediments the economy faces. But we'll look and I'll show you that by 2020, what's GDP going to be? It's going to be 2%. Why? It's going to be 2% because of labor productivity growth is weak. Hopefully it will improve with more investment in plant and equipment, which is being pushed by tax cuts, wage increases, and lack of employee availability. And the other thing is not people. There aren't a lot of people entering the labor force. People 16 years old, high school grads, college dropouts, and so on and so forth. There just aren't many people out there. It's literally as if, I don't know, suddenly intercourse just wasn't any much fun. And it doesn't make any sense, but that's what you get. I mean, there's no people. You can't make people take 16 years to get a 16-year-old, right? So GDP is going to ramp down to this number of 2% by the end of 2019 because the stimulus goes away and so on and so forth. Let's look. And last but not least, this is the yield curve. I want you to look at the black line. The red line got pushed up somehow, so just look at the black line. The yield curve, as you know, looks like this, right? Short-term money is cheap. Overnight money, you pay 1%. I'm making it up. 2-year money, 2%. 5-year money, 5%. I'm making up the numbers. That's a steep curve. Every year, you pay 1% more. But sometimes the long end of the yield curve isn't so much more expensive, and the curve gets flatter. As the curve gets flatter, the blue squiggly line approaches the black line from below. Notice how close we are right now. We're only about 30 or 40 basis points away between here and here. If the blue line goes above the black bar, the yield curve slope inverts, and it goes from positive slope to negative slope. That's a yield curve inversion. If you look at this graph, the last 6 times there's been a yield curve inversion, it's been followed by a recession. I'm not making this up. Inversion, right there, inversion, no recession, but there, the gray bars are recession. Recession, 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 recession. There's fear we're going to have a yield curve inversion by early next year if the Fed keeps raising rates, which they will. It's entirely possible. This time may be different, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced it's not different, but I'm also not convinced that it is different. If you look back 10 years ago, when Ben Bernanke and Greenspan were on the Fed, they both said in 2007 or 8 that this time is different. They were wrong. So if you think it's different, there are some reasons why. We can talk about it outside the room after I'm finished, but I'm not convinced it is. But the good news is, even when the recession comes quickly, it comes 8 months after, the earliest is 8 months after the inversion. So if we invert in 4 or 5 months, and then it's 8 months later, the earliest the recession really likely hits us comes 2020. I'm not saying it will hit in 2020, but I'm saying it could begin. That's when I'm going to go on recession watch, and I'll show you some more reasons why I'm slightly nervous. Let's talk about labor markets, and let's change the seat. Move your computer over. I don't want to step on it and break it. Yeah, all right, okay. So let's talk about labor markets. They are friggin' tight. They are tight. This is job growth. It went down from 3 million to 2, and then the last year or so it went up. Trump's victory and so on, deregulation, whatever. But now it's going down. We're creating 2.2, 2.1, 2.3 million jobs a year. The catch is our population growth, and minus retirees, old people, kind of like, well, you're old, yeah. Don't laugh, dude, you're old too. Don't laugh, don't laugh. That's only 100,000 jobs a month, 1.2 million jobs a year. So we're creating 1.2 million employable people, and we're creating 2.2, 2.3 million jobs. How do we do this? We drive the unemployment rate down. So look at the red. It's now at 3.9. The last 20 years, the low, 50-year low is 3.8 right there. We hit it 2 or 3 months ago. And before that, you've got to go back to the late 1960s to get an unemployment rate this low. If you think we're going to magically find lots of workers, you're out of your mind. I can't believe workers who are unemployed, who don't really look for work, and they go, nah, unemployment's not low. I want a 50-year low in unemployment before I look for a job. I mean, you're kidding me. There are a lot of reasons why there's problems with our labor force, but there are just problems with it. There's nothing you can do. The other thing to look here is look at the blue line axis on this side. It's been below 300,000. The blue's been below 300,000 now for 180 weeks, right? That's as long as it's been since the late 1960s. I mean, that was the summer of love, Janis Joplin. We were doing acid and stuff in Woodstock. I mean, no one was alive in this room, okay, except for you two. But I mean, this is incredible. Labor markets are super tight. Look here, quits. 2.4% of the labor force quit their job last month, and starting now last month. This is the best quit numbers since the late 1990s at the dot-com boom, better than the peak of the housing boom. Because unemployment is low and people are looking for jobs and getting jobs and so on and so forth. It's hard. Labor shortage is a serious problem. So now you might say to me, you're just lying to us. That unemployment rate isn't really true. There's more workers out there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, convince me. Look, this is the unemployment rate in green. It's now 3.9%. That's the peak of the housing boom. That's the peak of the dot-com boom. It's the same now as it was then. There's no workers there. How about these workers, discouraged and marginally attached? That's today, just below the line there, 1. That's where it was at the housing boom, the dot-com boom. It's the same. No workers there either. How about the last graph? Blue. Blue is people who work part-time, who want to work full-time, but believe it or not, can't find work. And you can see the numbers falling pretty rapidly, but there's not much space there either. So today it's here. This is where it was at the housing boom, the dot-com boom. It's a little higher today than there. That leaves maybe 1 million workers left, so we're going to run out of workers at some point, and that's going to slow down GDP growth. So we have fiscal policy that becomes contractionary come 2020. We have labor markets that are so tight because we are literally starting to run out of work. There are more open jobs right now, 7 million jobs, than there are unemployed Americans, 6.3. This happened for the first time in March or April, and now it's gotten bigger. It's a 700,000 person gap. This is crazy we're tight. Look here, this is the gap in unemployment rates between the overall national rate, 3.9, and the rate for African Americans. It's at or near a 50-year low. There's no workers out there. This is the rate between the overall rate and the rate for Hispanics. It's also at or near an all-time low. It was very low right there at the housing boom, right? Here it's as low as it was then, and that's almost a 50-year low. It's low for everybody. That's why we feel so good and happy. Let's talk about wage growth. You would think wage growth would be spectacular, wouldn't you? There are no workers, right? Who thinks that? You'd all be wrong. Not much wage growth. This is the actual number, includes the number from last Friday. It's certainly going up. There have been odd spikes in the past. I'm not sure they'll continue, but there's a general trend here. But 2.8% is nothing remarkable. This is late in the business cycle. Unemployment's at a 50-year low. You'd think you'd be doing better, and you are a little better. In part, it's so bad because old people are retiring. And older people have a good book of business. They do well, right? So they're retiring, making, $250,000, $500,000 a year. They're being replaced by a college freshman or a high school graduate making $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year. If you clean up for that demographic factor, you can see wage growth is a little better, 3.2, 3.3. But it's not going up. Why else aren't wages rising? This is really the crux of one of the weird things you see. Huge, fantastically tight unemployment, no wage growth, no unions. So inflation last year doesn't become an automatic pay raise this year, for example. There's other stuff going on too, but that's the simplest one. Uber, people like working for Uber or TaskRabbit or Fiverr or Airbnb. They don't make so much money, but they're their own boss. They make their own schedule. They kind of like it. So there's more of that. Labor productivity, as I talked about earlier, hasn't gone up. So if your employer's paying you based on what you make or what you do, how many loans you process or cups of coffee you serve, and you don't serve any more 1 year than the next, you won't get a big pay raise, right? They're hard to find you, so you get a little extra, but not more because of productivity growth. That's a problem. And last but not least, there haven't been very many births of new companies. Company growth, new firms, new small firms growth, employment in new firms, you can see has fallen. It's gone down considerably over the last 20 years. This hurts employment growth. For employees have fewer places to go to look for a job. It hurts. And last but not least, countries that get old, older countries, average population, grow more slowly and have less inflation. And have less wage inflation. So we're getting older, so we're becoming a little more like Japan. Just demographic. We're not Japan, don't think that way. But the older you get, the less wage. And people who are 60 years old don't change jobs. They're not desperate for a pay raise. They can't afford to lose their job because they won't find another one. So you don't look so much. You don't take so much risk when you're older, right? So how about inflation? Where are we in the inflation? Because that's going to determine what the Federal Reserve Board does. And inflation, my friends, is coming. It's coming slowly, but it's steadily coming. You can see here, CPI. Core is red, no food and energy. Blue is headline, including food and energy. Economists look only at the red, essentially, because food prices go up and down because of drought, and oil prices go up and down because of OPEC production and a war in Iran and something crazy like that, which doesn't tell you the underlying inflation rate here in the US. Look at the red and the blue. They're both going up. You can't avoid it. They're going up. The Fed doesn't use the CPI. They use the PCE, Personal Consumption Expenditure Deflator. And it's also going up. Look, This is unequivocally rising. It rose here, I see, and it rose there, I know. But we're late in a cycle. Companies are running out of productive capacity. We're running out of employees. Wage inflation starting to go up. This is the latent signs of starting inflation. The Fed doesn't want inflation to get out of hand. The Fed is raising rates because they see inflation starting to rise. It's rising slowly, so they can raise interest rates slowly, but it's certainly going up. And this is the other graph that tells you that the inflation is likely to really be here. The blue tells us how fast our economy can grow under ideal circumstances. Optimal utilization of workers and capital and labor and factories and all that stuff. Red tells us where we are. And what you see is sometimes we fall way behind after a recession. That's a recession bar. We fall behind and we catch up. We fall behind and we catch up. We fall behind and we catch up. That's the good news. But look what happens right before the recession. Right before the recession, the red touches the blue, or the red goes above the blue, or the red goes above the blue. What's happening right now? The red's above the blue. Now, when the red's above the blue, the factories are going and employees are getting pay raises and we're running out of productive capacity and input costs are going up. And what's the Fed doing? Right. Now, old recoveries like ours that are now in the 10th year don't die of old age. This notion of, oh, we're due for a recession because it's been so long is horse crap. It is. It's truly horse crap. This is like saying, oh, you know, I've worked 10 years at my job. I'm not going to come in for 8 months. No, you don't have that choice. You got a mortgage to pay and alimony to pay and child support to pay and college loans to pay and a student loan. I mean, you know, that's why you work, for God's sake, right? You don't just stop working. The economy doesn't stop. No, what happens is the central bank, the Fed, takes a gun, aims it at the economy and blows its brains out by raising rates too much. When you have an interest rate rising cycle like we're in now, the fear is the central bank will raise rates too quickly and drive us into recession. So what's the Fed going to do? So here, of course, the answer is the taller the Fed chairman, the higher the interest rates. It's obvious. So this guy Powell clearly is wrong. Not only is he not an economist that burns my derriere, but worse, he's a lawyer, even worse. But worse, he's too tall. What are they thinking? That's a mistake. Woo! He should have been 5 feet. Shorter people, lower rates. Trump wants lower rates, shorter Fed share. It's easy. It's the data. We're all victims of the height of the chair. It's insane. So what's the Fed going to do? Here's the story. So right now, interest rates are 1.875. They're between 1 3/4 and 2. The Fed's going to raise rates in 2 weeks at their next meeting. And the Fed's going to raise rates at the end of the year because inflation is starting to go. It's not going fast, but the Fed doesn't want to get behind the 8 ball. So by the end of the year, we're at 2.375. I think the following year we raise twice. But there are a bunch of economists who think they'll raise 3, a few think 1, a few think 4. So there's tremendous variation. My thinking is they only raise twice because by the end of 2019, GDP growth is down to 2% because of all the stimulus is over. Interest rates are higher. We're running out of workers. Fiscal policy is becoming contractionary, right? All these things are happening, lowering GDP. We're reverting to our long-term 2% growth. They can't have interest rates that are much higher than this with 2% GDP growth. They'll drive us into recession. So what I think actually happens is that by the end of 2020, we're back at the same place. It's possible in the middle they raise rates once or twice in the middle. So end of 19 is here, then 20 we start off a little higher maybe, and then come back. That's my guess as to what's going to happen. This is 2 years away. It's a long time, 18 months to 2.5 years away. It's hard to know, but I tend to think that by the end of 19, our economy is done with its massive growth, and the Fed's not going to raise rates if they've kept inflation under control. Remember, the neutral interest rate, Fed funds interest rate, is roughly 2.75%. That's neither expansionary nor contractionary. The Fed has to have a really good reason to go above that. Getting to that point, so 2.5, 2.7 is easy. They can get there without much problem in the Fed, Board of Governors, and so on. But to get above 2.7, they will have to see consistent inflation. And if they see it, they'll keep raising. I'm not sure they'll see it. That remains to be seen. I think our economy slows down come 2020 because of all this lack of stimulus, fiscal, monetary, interest rates, labor, trade, and so on and so forth. Let's talk a little bit about housing now, right? So we got a problem in housing. Look, the good news is there's lots of dollars being spent on home construction. Look at red. It's at a pretty high level, almost as high as it was back in 05 or something, right? But it's not as good. You know that. You know there's nothing being built, right? How do we know this? Look at this number. Blue is multifam. It's fine. There's no problem in multifam at all. We're building more multifam now than we did before the recession. 400,000 versus 380 roughly. But look at single fam in red. It's completely anemic. We're building far fewer homes than we should. We're in the 10th year of a recovery. We should be up here at 1.2 million single fam units and 400,000 multi, getting us to 1.6. But we're way below because builders can't build any cheap homes. They can't build any entry-level homes anywhere in America. It doesn't matter where. Here in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Wichita, Kansas, in Alamoso, and Alamogordo, New Mexico, and Las Cruces, it makes no difference. They cannot buy the land, get the inputs, and sell it and make a profit. They cannot do it. And as a result, we're simply short housing. We're now short probably 4 to 5 million units. That's why there's no inventory, because the builders can't build enough. The builders are happy. Of course they're happy. There are only 12 builders in America, and they're all building homes that cost $9 million. It's easy to be happy, but where do you get the homes you need? We don't build nearly enough entry-level homes. Those cookie-cutter homes that the builders were always crucified for building, we need them now. That's the whole problem. Those ugly, just copies of homes, they don't build them. There are laws against building homes that look the same. They're called, get this, anti-monotony laws. Who knew? I was born and raised in a monotonous house. I didn't know it. Now I see a therapist, I'm taking coke, we're working on it. Geez. So look at the price. This is the average price. That was pre-recession, that's the housing boom. That's where it is now. That's crazy. This is the median house. It was $240, now it's $320. It's up by a third. This is nuts. Incomes have barely recovered to where they were, yet house prices keep going up. There's inflation, it's true, but builders aren't building lower-end homes. They're building all the homes you need above entry level, essentially, but no entry level. Look at this graph. It shows it is a graphic illustration here. Look at the number of homes we built that were between 150 and under 150 in gray, and black between 150 and 200. That was 50,000 homes a month. Now we build no homes under 150 and 5,000. We've gone from 50,000 to 5,000. And that's the problem. The other prices of homes have largely recovered, but not the low end. We need more of those homes. They aren't being built, and they won't get built. Why? Regulatory costs have added $20,000 to a cost of a home, land, and the permits and all that crazy junk. Labor productivity in construction, in red, has been zero. There have been so many rules and regulations imposed on the builders, they cannot produce more homes per hour than they did 70 years ago. It seems impossible to believe, but there's been no improvement because of all the other problems. Wages are going up faster in construction because there are no workers, right? Because 10 years ago, the illegals went back to Mexico and didn't come back. And the Americans in it changed careers and aren't returning because they don't want to take the risk of being in the wrong sector. What else? Input costs are higher. Sure, they came down from their high point. Wood prices came down, but they're still more expensive than they were. So workers, land, labor, all these things, the builders can't make a cheap house and make any money, so they don't. Adding insult to injury, there are foreigners buying our houses. I'm joking. We love foreigners. Buy our houses, buy our debt, buy our bonds, and so on. But they're making supply come down too. So we have not enough homes. We have good job growth, decent wage growth, big demand, no supply, prices rise. This is not a credit-induced bubble like it was in 07. This is a purely demand and supply problem. If you look at the inventory of new homes, It's back at 300,000, roughly where it's supposed to be. If you look historically, 300,000, maybe 325, we're just about there. So of the homes that we're building the right number. We're just not building at the lower end, and that's critical. So what happens? We have no inventory. You can see here, year-over-year inventory last month, for the first time since June 15, didn't fall. It was unchanged. Unchanged. Thanks a lot for nothing, but flat is the new up, apparently, right? Now, we're seeing tentative signs of inventories going up in different places. It's going up a little bit, right here and there. We see prices in Seattle coming down. We see inventories in Reno and Las Vegas starting to rise, Phoenix a little bit. So we're starting to see a turn here. This couldn't go on forever. Where's the problem most acute in the lack of homes? At the cheaper end. These are homes 125% and less than the median. And there's no supply. Months of supply is least at this low end, at the higher price. Double the median price, we got plenty of houses. Thanks very much, yeah. And the builders are building those. But we don't need those. We need the cheaper ones. So look at the price increases. At the low end, the price increases are more extreme because we're not building any of those homes. We're building these, and of course we're building a bunch of those. Another way to look at it is here. This is 10 years of data. It comes from CoreLogic. And you can see low-priced homes have experienced much faster price appreciation because there aren't any of them. It's crazy. So what happens to home prices? They keep going up. The only good news here is about 6 months ago, home price increases were close to 7%. Now they're closer to 6. Hallelujah. I mean, you take good news where you get it. Remember, inflation's 2. Wage inflation's 3, home price appreciation 6. It's too much. Something has to give. So what's going to give? First, this is the real increase in home prices, inflation adjusted. Notice, we're not as high as we think. Nominally, we've broken records, all-time high in home prices, average, right? But look, real inflation adjusted, we're still a couple years away, 2 years, a year and a half away from hitting the all-time high. This is important to remember. They're going up, don't get me wrong, but it's not nearly as bad as you think, but it's going up too quickly. Now, there's no bubble out there. These are FICO scores as of Q2, end of Q2, right? And you can see there's been no deterioration in FICO the last 4 years. It's been dead flat. These are the bottom 10 percentile. This is really weak buyers, 650 FICO. No degradation in FICO. There's no bubble being induced. People who shouldn't get credit aren't getting credit. There's no problem there. The problem literally is a lack of homes because builders can't build enough at the low end, and there's big supply. Look at this credit availability. You cannot look at this slide and tell me we're back to where we were. This is from MBA. Look, this was when, if you were alive, you got a mortgage. How much do you make? $250,000. Can you prove it? Yes, I have a slip in my trunk. No, I believe you. It's okay. Here's a $4 million house. No, Dodd-Frank, so on and so forth. Things have been reasonably responsible here. But, existing home sales are flat. Why? Prices are going up. Interest rates are going up. There's no supply. Eventually, something has to give, and you see it here. It's just pretty much flat, maybe going down a bit, maybe flat, whatever, we can argue, but it ain't going up. This is important for you. So price increases are going up still at 6% a year, maybe 5% overall this year, but not volume. You're only going to make money on the price of the home, not more flow of homes being sold here. So dollar volume will go up, right? And you can look at California. This is your home sales for July every year. So it looked like it was improving. It went down and it went up and then it stopped because they're too expensive. And what's happening in California, or has happened in California, is now also happening in the US. Prices are up too much, relatively speaking. Inventory's down. Mortgage rates are higher and so on. So you can see here, mortgage apps, first-time mortgage apps, purchase mortgage apps, really haven't done much in a while because we're starting to see this slowdown. There's no problem here. This is not a harbinger of a decline. Housing's not going to lead us into the next recession. Don't worry about that. But it isn't getting better. And this is refi activity. I mean, if you have refi, just shoot yourself. Buy 2 guns, do it at once, play twice an hour. In an hour, it'll all be over. Russian roulette with yourself. It'll be fun. It's quick. It's crazy, right? And last but not least, our housing problems aren't going to go away because the millennials, a lot of them are still 20, 22 years old, the youngest ones. They're going to age into home buying. And the biggest cohort's going to be in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So this problem is going to persist. It's crazy. Quickly, a little bit about where we are nationally, and then we'll end here. So this is locations where APM has facilities. You're like all over the good states. You really are. Drugs are legal in Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Colorado. I mean, you're really picking good states here. Yeah, I like it. That's why your conferences are so well attended. This is current economic indicators. Next 3 months, they're looking fine everywhere in the US, certainly every state you're in. You have no bad states. Next, leading economic indicators are also equally good. No problems there. Now, look at this slide. This tells you where people move to. This is not births over deaths. This is simply immigration. And every state you're in, with the exception of Utah, right, is either growing by immigration or not shrinking in gray. Only Utah is. But there's so much births over deaths there, it doesn't matter. They have the fastest population growth in the country. Last but not least, look at this slide. This is a 60-year or 70-year history of population growth in the US, almost 70 years. And what you see is population growth here. And where were you located pretty much? Here. So you're in the states that have been growing fastest. Texas, for example, is continuing. Colorado is continuing. Utah, these are the states that are most desirable. I just don't understand why you're not in Alaska, because drugs are legal there too. It troubles me, it really does. Okay, let's wrap it up. First, my name, cell number, website, Twitter handle, email address, everything is there. I put out 70 words a day on economics. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. If you want to get it, if you have it, great. If you want to get it, give me your business card, go to my website, or text the word bow tie, like it's spelled, 6 letters, no hyphen, no space, to the 5-digit number 22828, and you'll hear from me every day. All right, quick review. The economy is excellent now. The chances of a recession are very, very low. I mean, mistakes happen, a war breaks out, whatever. But otherwise, we're good to go. I am not on recession watch until 2020. Between now and then, interest rates will rise, slowing the economy. Fiscal policy will become contractionary, slowing growth. Labor markets will get tighter and tighter. We won't have enough workers, slowing growth. Exports will decline because the globe is slowing a little bit. Trade tariffs are going to hurt us if they're imposed. You do enough of these things, something may well go wrong. That's why we may get a recession come 2020. I'm not telling you will, but keep it in mind as the likelihood keeps going up. Right now, almost no chance at all. So enjoy the time right now. Take all your drugs, have a good time, party hard, and get ready for what may happen later, but growth will slow. That is for sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.